The shy girl had planned to eat lunch alone, just her and a quiet bench in the park. But then she saw him, sitting hunched on the curb, eyes cast down like he was trying to disappear into the pavement. Without thinking too much, she tore her sandwich in half and offered it to him. No one would have guessed he had once been a millionaire, a man who had everything and then lost it all. A girl who didn't believe in herself now became the reason he wanted to begin again. Because sometimes one small act can open the door to an entirely new life. Emma usually sat alone on the second bench from the left, facing the patchy lawn dappled with sunlight. It was her favorite part of the day, 30 quiet minutes when no one expected her to answer emails, no one pushed for early reports, no phones trilled beside her ear. Just the whisper of wind through the trees and the faint scent of damp leaves rising from the earth. She opened her lunchbox with the same small ritual each day. The first compartment held a homemade chicken mayo sandwich. The second held thinly sliced apples brushed with lemon juice to keep them from browning. Everything prepared the night before in the narrow kitchen of her rented fourth-floor apartment. Emma didn't like eating out. Crowded places made her feel lonelier somehow, even when someone sat beside her. Today the sunlight wasn't harsh, but it cast a pale gold edge on everything, like a film scene paused mid-moment. Emma raised the sandwich to her lips and felt it. Someone watching, not a casual glance but a long still gaze that settled on her like dust. She turned her head, slowly. About 10 paces away, tucked behind the broad trunk of a eucalyptus, a man sat on a bench mostly hidden from view. His coat was old, frayed at the shoulders. Thin silver hair caught the light. He didn't blink, didn't look away when she met his eyes. But there was nothing urgent in his stare, no intensity, no pleading, just a quiet sorrow. A tiredness that felt familiar, as if he'd sat there 1,000 times before watching countless people pass, none of them looking back. Emma turned away quickly. She took a bite of her sandwich, then another. Her heartbeat was steady, but something inside her shifted. It wasn't fear, not quite, just unfamiliar. Because in that gaze, she saw something of herself. The quiet detachment, the sense of being an extra in the group photo, the name that never got called first from any list. She glanced over again. He hadn't moved. The sandwich had lost its taste. She set it down, reached for her water. Bottle. A breeze lifted a few strands of her hair across her cheek. Emma drank, then looked once more. Their eyes met a second time. This time, she didn't look away. They watched each other for a few seconds. No smile, no nod. Just a quiet recognition. I see you. And you see me. A sparrow hopped near her feet, pecking at a breadcrumb. Emma watched it, turning over the thought, should I do something? She wasn't one to initiate. She always let her friends call the waiter. But this wasn't a restaurant, it was a park. No one was watching, just him and her. And a half-eaten sandwich. Carefully, she tore the remaining piece in two, wrapped it in a napkin. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. Standing up, her first step felt thunderous, like the whole park must have heard it. But no one looked. Only he did. She walked toward him, stopping just a step away, placed the wrapped sandwich beside him on the bench. No words. Then she turned to go. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough and low, barely audible. Unless you were listening, Emma didn't turn back. But the corner of her mouth twitched. Almost a smile, not quite. She returned to her bench and didn't reopen her lunchbox. Her lunch break ended early, yet somehow she felt fuller. When her phone chimed the end of the hour, Emma stood. She didn't look back. But if she had, she would have seen him take a slow bite of the sandwich, eyes closed as if tasting something long forgotten. A memory, perhaps. A moment when someone had once shared something small, and maybe, just maybe, Emma had done the one thing no one else had managed that day, reminded someone that they still existed. That morning, Emma left home 10 minutes earlier than usual. Not because she needed to be at the office early, but because she needed space, a longer stretch of quiet. Time to sit with what she'd done yesterday and what she might do today. She walked slower than usual, her rubber soles making soft sounds against the brick pavement. In her bag was the same lunch she packed every day: chicken mayo sandwich, sliced apples, a small bottle of water. But today, there was something extra. A small paper bag carefully folded, holding an extra half sandwich, wrapped separately, as if reserved for someone who mattered. By midday, the park had filled up again. Office workers sought shade, students sprawled and laughed beneath the trees. Emma made her way to her usual bench, exhaling when she saw it empty. She sat but didn't open her lunch right away. Her gaze drifted quietly toward the bench under the eucalyptus tree, where he had sat yesterday. No one was there. A faint disappointment crept in, like walking into a cafe and finding your favorite pastry missing from the shelf. No one owed anyone anything, but part of her had hoped. She stayed still for a few minutes, trying to tell herself it was fine. Maybe he was just passing through. Maybe he'd found someplace better. Then she opened her lunchbox and began to eat. The first bite passed slowly. She'd just finished the second when, "Excuse me." The voice was low, rough, but familiar. Emma looked up. He was standing beside her bench, holding a worn cap in his hands, eyes cast down, as if he were the one apologizing for coming back. Emma said nothing. She simply gave a small nod, an invitation to sit. Not too close, but not too far either. He sat on the opposite end, keeping a careful distance as if afraid to disturb the fragile quiet between them. A breeze lifted the edge of her scarf. He looked at it, then at the lunch in her lap. "No need to share," he said gently. Yesterday was more than enough, but Emma had already placed the extra sandwich, wrapped in its own napkin, on the space between them. She didn't speak, didn't look at him, just left it there. He stared at the package for a long moment, as if it held something from long ago. Then he reached for it. Didn't open it right away, just held it. His hands were rough, calloused with chipped nails, but the way he held the sandwich was careful, almost reverent. Emma turned back to her own lunch, eating as though nothing had happened, but her heart no longer sat quietly inside her. There was something. Light in it now, like distant piano music, drifting into an open room. He unwrapped the sandwich. The scent of mayo and bread floated into the air, mingling with the smell of grass and warm sun. He took a bite, slow and thoughtful. His face softened. He didn't speak, didn't need to. "My grandmother used to make these," he murmured. Not to her exactly, more to the air between them. "She'd stir a little honey into the mayo. I always thought no one made them like that anymore." Emma paused. Her eyes widened, just slightly, then gentled again. She didn't say anything, but something beat differently inside her chest. After a while, he rested the half-eaten sandwich on his lap, folded his hands over it like someone in prayer. "Thank you," he said. "I know it's not a big thing for you, but yesterday..." It was the first time in a long time I felt seen. Emma still said nothing, but her throat tightened, and she took a sip of water to ease it. That moment between two strangers who hadn't exchanged names, who hadn't asked about each other's lives, sat delicately in the air, like a scene caught between two panes, of glass, fragile, clear and whole. At 12:55, Emma quietly packed up her lunchbox, snapped the lid shut as she always did. She stood, adjusted her scarf and looked at him once before walking away. He nodded. Not a dramatic nod, not expectant, just a quiet gesture that said, "Maybe I'll see you again, if the world allows it." Emma walked toward the office, but her steps were no longer tentative like yesterday's. Maybe just a little, only a little. Something inside her had opened. And perhaps, just perhaps, the world had opened too, waiting to welcome her in. The third day of that quiet noon ritual arrived with softer sunlight and a breeze laced with the scent of last night's rain. Emma took her seat on the familiar bench, but this time her hands didn't reach for her lunchbox. She waited. She didn't know what she was waiting for, or who. But inside her there was a hush calling out his name, and then, as if the universe wished to preserve the thread of silence between them, He appeared, emerging from behind the trees, his step steady, gaze direct. No hesitation, no apology. Just presence. Emma shifted slightly to the left, a small motion but full of meaning. He understood. He sat down. There was no sandwich today. Emma hadn't packed an extra. She hadn't thought to, but he didn't ask. They sat in quiet for a while, the chirping birds, the distant hum of traffic, all muffled beneath the weight of unspoken things. "You might think I'm lying," he began, his voice low and slow like water moving under thawing ice. "But I once had 3 cars, a corner office on the top floor, and a team who called me boss. With respect?" Emma didn't respond, but something in her tilted, not because of what he said, but because there was no pride in his voice, not a trace. "My wife used to pack me lunch every day," he continued, his gaze drifting toward the lawn, "until I stopped noticing, too busy chasing more." The wind shifted. A eucalyptus branch dipped, and a single yellow leaf landed on Emma's lunchbox. "I lost it all," he breathed. "Not because of the market, not because someone wronged me, but because I believed I could never be wrong." Emma lifted the leaf gently, brushed it clean. Still, she didn't look at him, but her silence was not cold. It was the kind of listening that asked for nothing, that held no judgment. "I've been drifting for nearly 2 years," he said. "There were moments I thought maybe disappearing would make the world breathe easier." At that, Emma paused. A chill ran through her, not from the wind, but from the sudden, stark understanding that she might be sitting beside someone who had once stood at the edge. She didn't know what to say. All the lines from therapy books, all the neat phrases of comfort, none of them lived here. Only the sound of her heartbeat and his voice slowing like a confession. "When you handed me that sandwich," he said with a faint, almost incredulous smile, "I thought someone was playing a trick. Who's kind to a stranger for no reason?" Emma turned to him, not to answer, just to let him know she was here. "But you didn't ask." "Who I was. Didn't expect anything. You weren't afraid of me," he said. "You just shared, as if it were the most natural thing in the world." They fell into silence again. A gentle kind of stillness spread around them like the steam from a cup of tea. It didn't need resolution or clarity. It simply needed to be remembered. "I'm not asking for anything," he said at last. "I just wanted to say thank you. A true thank you." Emma nodded. Soft as a leaf, landing on a shoulder. She didn't smile, but her eyes shone. When her phone chimed the end of lunch, she stood, but this time she turned back to look at him, not for long, but long enough for him to see, "I heard you, and I believe you." He didn't say another word. He didn't need to, and she didn't need more. That evening, after a workday that felt endless, buried in spreadsheets and unanswered calls, Emma didn't head straight home. Instead, she walked against the tide of office workers pouring from the towers, slipping into a narrow alley wedged between 2 aging buildings. Street lamps flickered on above her, casting a dim yellow glow like memories stirred from a long sleep. "Where are we going?" he asked, footsteps trailing hers. Emma didn't answer right away. Her hand clutched the strap of her bag, not out of fear, but as if she were holding on to something delicate. Maybe hope. Maybe the quiet fear of being let down. They stopped in front of a small cafe with peeling paint on its sign and dusty glass windows. Inside sat a few wooden chairs draped with time-stained white cloths and a bar counter curved like the back of an old man. "I used to come here every Saturday afternoon," Emma said, her voice steadier than usual. He looked around, saying nothing. "It's been closed for 3 years," she continued. "The owner moved back to live with her daughter, but I still walk by every month just to make sure it's still here." A breeze stirred the wind chime above the awning, its delicate clinking soft against the quiet. Emma turned to him. "I used to dream about opening a little place like this. Not busy, not loud, just peaceful." He remained silent, not because he didn't have words, but because he knew what it meant to truly listen. "But I never dared to start," Emma said. "I always thought I wasn't good enough. Not brave enough, not something enough. A bus roared past, brakes hissing as it pulled away. Then silence returned, fragile as a bubble. "Old things carry soul," he said finally. "They just need someone who still believes they have worth." She turned to look at him. Not guarded, not cautious, but with the soft curiosity of someone asking, "Do you really believe that?" "What did you see in me?" he asked. Not accusingly, just honestly. Emma pressed her lips together, then answered softly, "Maybe. Because I saw myself, someone who thought they had nothing left to give." He nodded, and for once his eyes weren't tired. There was something flickering there, a small flame. Faint, but persistent. "Would you want to try that? Dream again?" he asked, not looking out at the world this time, but directly at her. Emma didn't reply at first. In her mind, she saw again those quiet afternoons by her apartment window, sketching a cafe in her journal. A few bookshelves, some potted plants, a corner for strangers to sit and just be. "If I wasn't doing it alone, maybe I could," she whispered. He smiled. Not a perfect smile, but warm enough to shift the air between them. "Let me be the first to brew the coffee," he said. "I used to make it myself for my clients, back when I had an office and pride." Emma nodded. Sometimes trust doesn't come with oaths or promises. Sometimes it's simply someone walking beside you when you veer off the path you've always known. The beginning didn't arrive with a ribbon cutting or a grand agreement. For Emma, it began with a crumpled sheet of paper and a fountain pen that ran out of ink halfway through. They sat side by side on the back steps of the old cafe. The street lamp down the alley cast just enough light to outline their faces, but not enough to take away the quiet privacy each kept tucked inside. "I was thinking, maybe we call it Cafe Second Chance," he offered, sketching a steaming cup onto the paper. Emma looked up, lips pressed in a soft line. "Not a no, but not yet a yes, nor half a sandwich," he joked, this time with a small smile. She laughed, a real laugh. Crisp, warm, the kind that sounded like spring cracking open after a long frozen winter. "Sounds like a soup kitchen." "Well," he said, the sincerity in his voice smoothing out the humor, "didn't we save each other?" Emma didn't answer, but her pencil moved again, adding a stool, a little wooden menu board. That was her reply, night after night. They met after work, sometimes on those old steps, sometimes under a tree in the park, sketching by flashlight. He told stories about his years running a company, about choosing espresso machines based on water pressure, not price, about the clients who used to toast his name at parties, people who now wouldn't remember his face. Emma listened. But what struck her most wasn't the gloss of success. It was how he spoke of his failures, not with bitterness or blame, just quiet ownership. "Do you really think," she asked one night, their plan nearly complete, "people will buy coffee from a cart run by a broke old man and a quiet girl?" "They won't come for who's selling it," he said. "They'll come for how it makes them feel." "And what if they don't feel anything at all?" "Then at least we did," he said, eyes still on the design sketch. Emma glanced at the words scribbled in his uneven handwriting. "Take what you need. Give what you can." The slogan he wanted to paint on the side of the cart. Part of her thought it was cheesy, but a bigger part thought it was right. She began to picture herself behind a small counter, pouring coffee, wiping cups, smiling at strangers. The image was foreign, but it no longer scared her. "We'll need funding," she said one day as they listed supplies. "How much do you have?" he asked, his voice calm. Emma looked down. "I have some savings. Not much. But I'm willing to use a portion." He didn't smile. In fact, he looked more serious than she'd ever seen him. "I won't let you lose anything because of me." "You didn't make me lose," she said. "You gave me a reason to try for the first time." A breeze scattered their papers. Emma stooped to gather them. One page held a crooked sketch of a coffee cart, with a logo shaped like half a sandwich. She stared at it a little longer than necessary, then tucked it carefully into her bag. That night when she got home, Emma didn't turn on the light. She stood in the dark for a long while, listening to her own heartbeat. the sound of someone beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could start again. Saturday. The sun was gentle, the breeze thin and cold enough to make you crave something warm in your hands. Emma stood behind the freshly painted white coffee cart, the logo still carrying the scent of new paint. Her fingers trembled slightly as they wrapped around the first paper cup. This wasn't a sketch anymore, no longer a whispered dream under flickering lamplight. The coffee cart, small, tidy, and unassuming, was real now, parked in the very park where she used to eat lunch alone. He stood beside her in a neatly pressed shirt, ironed by Emma herself, hair combed back, smile soft. No one would guess he'd been sleeping on a bench just weeks before, in the quiet corner of this same park. "You okay?" he asked. Emma took a breath, eyes scanning the short line ahead. Not long, just a few co-workers she'd nervously emailed the night before. But to her, each person was a quiet test of courage. "I will be," she whispered. The first to step forward was Mia, from accounting, the colleague who always offered a polite smile when passing Emma's desk, but never more than that. "I'll have a latte," Mia said, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. Emma poured the milk, pressed the machine, her hands trembling just enough to miss the mark, a drop of milk spilling over the rim. Her cheeks flushed. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, a silent nod of reassurance. "Slow down," he whispered. "Every cup tells a story." The first drink was done. Emma held it out with both hands, lips pressed in anticipation. Mia took a sip. Her face lit up. "Oh, wow, this is really good. Emma, did you make this?" Emma nodded softly. Words stuck in her throat, but her smile emerged, tentative and shining like the first sunlight of spring. Then came the second customer, then the third. One by one. They came, tasted, lingered. No one rushed off. They stayed, chatted, told Emma how the scent reminded them of a street in Paris or a coffee shop their mother once took them to as a child. Emma remembered every word, not to brag but to believe, that the kindness she once gave quietly and without condition was circling back to her, softly, precisely, right on time. By noon, he handed her a cup of coffee he'd made himself. "For the founder," he said, eyes twinkling. Emma accepted it, the first cup she drank from their cart. It was strong, warm, and somehow familiar. She looked at him and nodded. "I think we can do this," she said. "We already have," he replied. They sat again on the old back steps after the tasting was done. The cart was pushed into the garage behind the cafe. In their hands, warm cups, and in their chests, something warmer, belief. Emma looked out across the park, eyes far away. "I used to think I was only good at small things, careful things, safe things. And today," he asked. "Today," she paused, searching for the right shape of the truth. "I think I'm good at beginning." He didn't say anything, just looked at her the way someone looks at a seedling breaking through the soil after a long, hard storm. Early Sunday morning, the sky stretched out pale and colorless, like a sheet left undyed. The air was crisp, the scent of wet earth lingering after last night's rain. Emma arrived early, her old beige scarf trailing softly behind her with every step. The coffee cart had already been rolled into place, right at the bend between two towering trees, where weekend passers-by wandered slowly, unhurried. The small logo on the side of the cart glowed faintly under the streetlight. Second Chance Cafe, a quiet reminder of why it was here at all. Emma checked everything. Paper cups, sugar, milk, the espresso machine. Her hands trembled slightly, but her movements were steady. He stood beside her, silent, watching, his presence behind her like a solid wall, not pushing, just ready to catch her if she wavered. "I imagined this day a dozen times," Emma said, her voice softer than the wind. "But I never thought it would feel this real," He nodded. "Truth doesn't shout, and it just shows up and sits beside you, like an old friend." The first customer appeared, a middle-aged woman walking her dog. She paused, tilted her head toward the logo, then approached. "Good morning," she said. "What's special about the coffee here?" Emma opened her mouth to describe the flavor notes, the almond milk, the carefully sourced roast, but something stopped her. She looked into the woman's eyes and smiled. "Our coffee has something people often forget," she said. "What's that?" "Ty's kindness," Emma replied as gently as a breath. The woman laughed. "Then give me a cupful of kindness." The first cup was handed over. Emma watched, not because she doubted the taste, but because in that moment she realized she had just handed someone a piece of her dream. The next guests arrived slowly. A college student with a book tucked under his arm, a young couple, hand in hand, an elderly man on his morning walk. They stayed, not just for caffeine, but for something else. The way the cart stood there, quiet and beautiful, like it had always belonged. Each cup of coffee came with a bit of conversation, a warm glance, a smile that felt like it had waited years to be used. He didn't say much, just adjusted the milk steamer, wiped the counter, handed out napkins. But everyone felt he was part of the place, like a soul that had been rooted there long before the cart had wheels. A little girl tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, this cafe is so pretty." "Is it from a fairy tale?" Emma heard her and laughed. The question, though childlike, felt oddly true, because sometimes fairy tales don't need castles or magic spells, just a small cart, a man who once fell, and a girl who once didn't believe in herself. As the morning drifted on, the sun warmed and the line grew longer. One customer paused, asked, "What's the story behind this place?" Emma glanced at him. He didn't speak, just nodded, quietly handing the story over to her. She drew a breath, then said, "It started with a lunch, a sandwich, and someone I almost didn't see." The customer smiled, eyes attentive, and Emma went on, not like she was telling a tale, but like she was passing a gentle truth into the hands of someone willing to hold it. By late afternoon, they closed the cart, packed everything away. He sat down on the familiar steps, exhaling. With quiet relief, "You did it," he said. Emma sat beside him, resting her head against the wooden cart. "Not alone." He looked at her and smiled. "I didn't say alone, I said you, because only you could have turned a small meal into something this big." Emma lowered her gaze, didn't reply, but her eyes shimmered. And inside she knew, today what she served wasn't just coffee. It was belief that everyone deserves a second chance. Some things begin in silence, and some things end in it too, but the kind of silence that lingers like sweetness on the air, warm as the last breath of spring before summer bursts into bloom. That afternoon, the park was just as peaceful as ever. Sparrows still hopped along the stone path. Bicycles still rolled lazily beneath rustling trees. But something had changed. Emma was no longer sitting alone on the old bench. Beside her was the man who had once looked at her sandwich as if it were a framed painting come to life. They were no longer strangers brought together by chance. They were two people who had rebuilt something from the ruins. Quietly, with trust and kindness, between them sat a small lunchbox, unremarkable in appearance, but a symbol of everything that had brought them here. "We really did it," Emma said, not looking at him but at the apple slice in her hand, as if it held her entire journey. "We didn't just do it," he replied, eyes following a slow-moving cloud across the pale sky. "We became part of each other's story." They ate slowly, unhurried, as though each bite held a memory. A few familiar faces passed by, waving like to old friends. Some called Emma by name. Others nodded at him with quiet familiarity. No one saw a homeless man anymore. No one saw a timid girl. They were seen now for who they truly were. A little girl ran past with her dog, then stopped, wide-eyed. "Are you the coffee people? I had your hot chocolate the other day. It was so good." Emma beamed. "Would you like another?" The girl nodded so hard her curls bounced. He stood and waved toward the coffee cart parked by the grass. "Come on, Miss Emma's going to make you a special one." Emma laughed and rose to follow. But before leaving, she glanced back at the bench, the one that had once held her loneliness, and now held the memory of her first connection. "We should name it the sandwich bench," she joked. "Or the second chance seat," he said. Serious though his eyes twinkled. They walked slowly, Emma's scarf fluttering behind her in the breeze. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know where the little coffee cart might take them. But she knew this much. Every beginning, no matter how small, has the power to change a life. And it all started with a sandwich. Shared in kindness. If you believe a single sandwich can save a soul, leave a heart in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to help us share more of these small stories, the kind that just might change a life.